Metrology. Today we're going to be going over how to report things in IM Inspect. This basic part here is casting that we have scanned in. I brought in my CAD model, and I have some data here from scanning. This is kind of a general inspection for casting. I'm going to go through how to report it for casting purposes, like as if you're going to set it up for machining, and then as well as we'll go through some datum reference frame measurements. So generally the first thing you're going to do is you're going to bring your scan and get aligned, and you're going to create all these features. So I have here, I created a color map on it. I'm going to turn on my color map. Usually with a color map you'll have some annotations in here showing some of the bad spots on the part that you want to highlight. So the first thing in reporting a color map is I'm going to have the CAD model turned on and the color map activated, and all of the annotation points that I want on this particular part turned on here. And one thing that I'll go through and do with color map inspections is using the Cardinal views. I'll go through and align this part here, and I can go to this icon here, it's the Capture 3D Scene icon. If I take that and hit that button, what it'll do is it'll add a snapshot to my tree view in the bottom left. So what I typically do is I'll go through each one of the different axes, and I'll go through and create a snapshot for each one of these. That way you can see exactly where all the deviations are. So I'll go through and do that. And with some parts, it's also helpful to have some of these isometric views inside of there. It allows you to see better inside of different areas of the part where you wouldn't normally be able to see from the direct Cardinal views. So now I have all these snapshots I've added in right down here. If you'll notice, I'm in my best fit to reference alignment. This is just kind of a best fit to see where you have material. So now that I have my snapshots created, I can go ahead and select these guys right down here. If I right click on them, I can go to Create Auto Formatted Report. What this will do is it'll automatically create a report based on the template that you have installed. For us, we have a exact metrology template that we've created, and it just adds those on to the last pages right there and inserts them in and kind of fits them. I usually find that these work best having 2 per page. It's kind of nice. You can do where you have 1 per page, such as like this here in our template. We just could drop this in, but it doesn't really add that much in size. So it can automatically create a report that way. Next thing I'm going to do, go back to my 3D scene here, is now that I have my color maps images started, I can go in here and add in, if I turn off my casting here, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my cross section right here. If I turn my color map back on, I can add in cross-section snapshots of this as well. Now with cross-sections, I can do the same kind of things that we did before. I can create annotations just by simply clicking on a particular spot on the data or on the CAD, and it'll tell me what that number is, and I can create a snapshot by simply pressing this button here. Now the next thing I'm going to do, if I turn on my CAD model, I have all these snapshots created for these color maps. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my alignment here to my reference targets alignment. Okay. Now, one thing you'll notice is if I go to the properties of these snapshots, its alignment is set to the active alignment, which means whenever I change my alignment from the best fit to the reference target points alignment, it'll change with it. Now, on this particular part, I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I can select all of these snapshots. I can go to their properties, and I can tell it to stick to the best fit to reference alignment. And so now, irrelevant of what alignment I have active here, it will always stick to that best fit to reference alignment. So with a part like this, I've created the datum A plane, which is across here. Datum circle B is sitting right here, and datum circle C is sitting right there. And on the print, the casting locators for the machining process are here. Okay, so next what I can do is select these two features, and I can report their positions in the reference targets alignment so that based on the machining fixture, we know where these are sitting. To do that, I simply select the two of them, and I go down here to report. These are all different templates for a table. So if I just hit table, it'll create a table based on the default template. This right here is the table it created. If I double click on that and open it up, you can see here, this is just the basic table template you're going to have. You have the ability to have a header on the table. It'll list the units, the coordinate system, the data alignments. Most of the time, I don't find these terribly helpful. So what I can do is I can right click on it. I can edit it and change it to whatever I want it to be. Or I can just remove it altogether. These here, I can turn these on or off just by turning them up, right-clicking and turning them off, and I can add other ones as well. Any one of these or these guys. Generally, though, I turn all of these off. Usually, if it's the first table in a report, I'll leave the units just so that way there's no confusion. Inside of the table here, you have several different columns. You can edit these columns. You can change the order of them however you want. If you right click on these guys, you can see there's other columns you can add in. There gets to be quite a few of these guys. If you go through them all, I'm going to turn off the auto tolerance deviation. And I'm going to turn off characteristic number and characteristic name. Let me show you something. The one that I do find very helpful typically when you're ballooning print is characteristic number. What that's referring to is if I select datum circle B and I go to my geometry controls here, there's this icon right here, hide and show controls. Let's say on this print that diameter, when I'm ballooning it, I go through and let's say it called out that diameter as the very first call out. I'm going to give that a balloon of 1. I can give this one 2, 3, 4. That way it's easy to identify which call out that is. When I go to my table, it's going to give that characteristic number, which makes it a lot easier for ballooning, especially if one of these features has more than one characteristic. In those cases, what I usually do is I'll remove the name. That way I can just go by the characteristic number. Let's type in some numbers for these guys. Now if I go back down to my table, you can see the characteristic numbers. And then I can just drag that over, so that's the very first thing you'll see. I can set these controls by templates. I can change, by clicking on the letter A here, I can change the format of the table, such as the font that it uses, the size of the font, the number of decimal places. You can change it so that it will color the cells based on the whether it's passing or failing the tolerance. And then down here I can set this as default, hit OK, and that's now the default template. I can set this as default. I can give it a name. And now you'll see here we have default 1 in the list. That simply makes it easier so that next time if I go and I make features and I want to report them the same way, I can simply right click on them, go to report, and I can just go to default 1. And now the table that it creates here is automatically in that same format. I can delete that table just by right clicking and hitting delete. Now, one thing to notice is that when you double click on this, there are no settings for which alignment this falls in. So if I was to go and change my alignment from the reference targets to the best fit, those values would change. The way to change that is to go ahead and right click on the table, go to properties, and inside of here, this is where you can change the alignment that this uses. So by changing this to reference targets alignment, hitting apply and close, I can then add this to my report. Give the computer a second to catch up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete these pages that I don't need just by selecting them and hitting delete. It'll remove the pages. So the next thing I can do is if I select this page right here, hit insert, it'll add a page right at the end here. I can click and drag that table onto this page. All right, save, it'll update everything. And now I'm actually reporting the color map in the best fit alignment and at the same time reporting these values in the target reference alignment. This is how you would be able to report in multiple alignments. And the same thing goes if I was to create a second table, which I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I have the datum A plane, datum circle B, and datum circle C. And now on the part here, if I turn on these two circles right here and select one of these, you'll notice I have this true position call out here. Now, one thing to note is that the deviations here, we have in X about 4 thousandths. Well, one true position value of 1,000 doesn't quite compute from an X value of about 4 thousandths. So what's happening here is because we're currently using the reference targets alignment, that's what the X, Y, and Z value are going to be reported under. These are the active alignment. A true position value is going to be calculated based on the datum reference frame of A, B, and C. In order for these values to calculate and equal what this is measuring out at, I have to create that A, B, C alignment. So I'm going to go to my Alignments tab. At the very bottom here, I'm going to go to the datum reference frame alignment. Inside of here, I can select the alignment that's being used in this true position callout and hit align. The computer will calculate all these values and it's going to move the part. So now you can see how we have 8 tenths, 2 tenths. That's going to make sense for this guy right here. Okay, so now when I report these two, I can go here, report, and again, I can just select the default that I had created that works for my reporting, and it'll create that table. I now have this second table down here. Now these values are being measured to the datum reference frame. Okay, so now I can go back to my report. And I can drag this table in. Now again, since my first table already is saying that units, I'm going to right click on this guy, double click on it, and I can go in here and I'm going to remove the length units. Okay. And now these values are all going to make sense. Okay. Now I can also go in here and just like I was showing before, this one's the reference targets alignment. I can go in here and add the alignments listed that way. I know, for example, this table at the top is using the reference targets alignment. This one's using the datum reference frame ABC. Okay. Now, one thing to note on this is that some of you may notice that over here, these are showing up in the tree view. Polyworks has two different ways of creating its report items. If I go to the IM Inspect Options page, and I go to Objects, drop that down and go into here, Reports. This very first option here for Tree View, this is where it's going to create and put those items. Right now in the Tree View, whenever I create an object, like a snapshot or a table or a feature table, it just drops it right into my Tree View. If I go here and change it to Active Formatted Report, it's going to bypass the Tree View altogether and put it directly into the report. So, for example, I have some comparison points that I've added in here. Okay. And I want to see where those are. Turn off my... Okay, so I want a table listing the locations of these guys, how far off they are and such. So if I select these and I right click, I'm going to go to report, I'm going to go to table. It did not add a table in here. If I open up my report, it automatically dropped it right into the report here. Okay. The one downside of this is when you get into non-repeatable report features, it can be a bit cumbersome to edit them and bring them back in. As an example, one thing that I can do on this part, if I, let's see, I'm going to turn off my comparison points, turn on my color map. One thing that I'll do with, for example, castings that have some kind of core that measure the outside, then you cut it in half and measure the inside, stitch the two together, and you want to know where that core is. One way to see that core is through a section view. If I cut a section of this part like this, and I'm looking at it like that, getting a color map to the inside of it where you wouldn't normally be able to see without any other type of view, and I create a snapshot of that. I go to my report. This is not going to repeat on the next part. Section views are non-repeatable. And it will be, rather than seeing a section here, you're just going to see the entire part. So that's one area where it's nice to have features in tree view. Let me show you what it would look like if it was in the tree view. It gives it this guy right here, a little anchor. Okay, so then if I drag this guy in here, on the next part, the snapshot would not have the cross section. I can just come in here and right click on it and go to edit, and I can go to restore project view. And then I can just go to my section view and then create that snapshot again. That's one area where I find it a lot easier to have the objects in the tree view rather than a report. But it's mostly preference, personal preference more than anything else. Another thing that I've done on this part, I'm going to go over, is I've created cross-section features. So if I turn on my cross-section, turn off my CAD model here, see I have a bunch of dimensions I've created here. Polyworks has the capability of doing cross-section dimensioning. It really does look pretty slick because it looks kind of like the dimensions on the print. Now, one thing I'm going to do in this is I'm going to take this as a snapshot, but I'm not going to want all of these windows right here. These are the annotations that are kind of obnoxious for this kind of reporting. So what I can do is select all of these guys in here, and I can go to annotation, or I can go to properties and just uncheck the annotation button, hit apply and close, and now my annotations are gone and all I see is the dimensions themselves. So in order to move these guys around, if I hold down the Alt key and click and drag, I can just move these to where I want, to where they make sense. That way there's no overlap or anything like that. Okay, now that I have the dimensions where I think I want them, I can just go ahead and hit Capture 3D Scene. It'll put a snapshot in the tree view for me. And I'm going to go down here, get rid of this guy. And I'm going to put this snapshot right in my report like that. Now, since I have 3 different alignments in here, anytime I create a snapshot or a table, I need to make sure that I go in and set, oops, if I double click, it'll open it up in Windows. I need to go make sure I go into properties and change the datum alignment or the data alignment to the alignment that I want it to stay to. Okay, with these anchored snapshots, like the section view here, it will not allow you to set the active alignment because it's a non-updatable item. It's simply a one-time thing. So whichever alignment you had active at the time that it was taken is the one that it will stay on. This feature table here, I need to change this to datum reference frame. Okay. And then the comparison point table is going to be to the datum reference frame. I'm going to right click and I can go to edit table. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the units, coordinate systems, and linked objects. Okay. With comparison points, you'll notice there's no nominal value. That's because the nominal is assumed to be 0. So if you see anything where that's missing, for example, there's no nominal for true positions in most GD&T because it's assumed to be 0 is nominal. So those will never fill in. Let's see, so there's inside of this guy, if I double click on this and I add the name back in there, you'll notice it has this circle right here. If I go in here, there's object icon. If I turn that off, it won't show what that icon is or what that feature is. So it can be kind of nice to have that in there. That way you know exactly what kind of feature was being used, irrelevant of the name. A lot of times what you'll see is a feature will be named, for example, this circle. You'll give it a name like item 1 on inspection report. Well, that doesn't necessarily tell you what kind of feature it is, which makes it nice when it comes to these tables to have that icon in there. That way you know what kind of feature it was that was used to measure that particular dimension. So now even though it's named item 1 instead of circle 1, whatever, you still know what type of feature it is. Same thing goes for here. The icons for the surface points are going to be the same icon that you would get right here for that feature. Now you'll notice in here the tolerances are coming up default in these tables. If I go to my geometry controls right inside of here for whichever feature I have selected. So for example, I'm going to go to my datum circle B. Right now I have these guys being reported out. I can change those tolerances by simply going in here and selecting a default tolerance for it. So for this guy, I'm going to set this at 5 thousandths. Okay. Once I save this, let me save this together. You can see here, it's changed that tolerance to 5 thousandths. I can go in here and add in any other values that I need to know. For example, radius. If I check that, it'll automatically add that value in. And you can just scroll through this. Again, if you can't see any of these features, go to this top right icon. This will show you all the additional features that are values that you can get off that particular feature in the tree. Min and max deviation is a helpful one. It'll show you the difference between your minimum diameter and your maximum diameter on the circle, for example. So next I have created a second color map in here. And this is kind of a fun one here. This is, I have a surface on this part. Let's turn this on here. I have this surface I created right here, and they're calling for a profile of the surface. So what I've done is I created that surface feature there, and I can go in here and I can add a GD&T surface profile of this guy. Tell it what my datum reference frame is, simply putting it exactly as the print would show it. The computer will calculate out what the value is. Okay, and now I can see what the minimum and maximum deviation is, the surface profile value that it came out with. And something else I can do, it's really nice to help kind of see where those errors are is I have created a color map of its deviation. Okay, so now I can go in and actually show, based on this profile, where those errors are. Now with this color map, again, since I'm using a datum reference frame of A, B, and C to measure that profile value, when I go and take the snapshot of this deviation map, I need to make sure that my alignment is the datum reference frame that's being used to calculate that surface profile. So I have the DRF ABC activated. I can go ahead and hit capture the 3D scene, go back to my report. I can go ahead and I can insert page. Go down to my last snapshot I took right here. And I can just drag and drop this right into here. Okay. So those are the primary functions or tools that you have for inputting data into a report, is snapshots as well as feature tables. You can do tables on just about anything on here that you want. You can even do, for example, you can report your alignment table. Okay, it'll kind of show a comparison of the different alignments. And what it'll do is bring this in here like this. It'll give you all the values for that. So the Euler angles, the translations, all the parameters for that. Okay, so then I can go ahead and bring in this guy. It'll show you all the translations for that one. And then I can bring in the datum reference frames alignment. That way, if someone wanted to know all of these values, which I haven't had, but you can sometimes have that, it is all there, it's available. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to actually change some of this formatting. As you can see, for example, our default template we've created has, for example, my information on it so that the customer can get a hold of me. But you can change all of this for your particular use. So I'm going to go over that now. If first off, the header here, we can change this. Just right click, go to edit background, and you can grab this guy and move it, delete it, and you can bring in, for example, your own another image. Let's see, for example, I can bring in, whoa, that came in a lot bigger than I thought it would. I can bring in my business card, put that right there. Okay. If I wanted to say insert a text field in here, I can right click and go to create. And I can insert, there's two different types. I can bring in a fixed text field, which is where I can type this whatever I want in. Right like that. I can create a variable text field, which will change every single time. So a variable text field will be blank every time I create a new report, and you'll just have to type it in. So a good use for this would be for notes, for example. That way, when I create a new one, there's a blank field, and the operator can just type in, you know, hey, this part really did not look right and didn't fit on the fixture, whatever. It'll be blank every time. I don't use those terribly often, but they are available for you. I can go in here and I can create all kinds of cool lines and stuff like that if you want to. So for example, on this part, if I really wanted to emphasize, for example, that that part, no, let me flip it around. That hey, that spot on the parts really, really bad, we need to do some work on it, for example, I can do that. I can add in all kinds of different things inside of here. It will, for example, text fields, if I go to the item creation options, the alignment for the text where default comes in, I can change that right there. I can change what the default text is. So like, for example, right now it's Times New Roman. I can change all of that kind of stuff right there so that the default is changed there. For tables, you can set a max column width. Honestly, I've never had to do that, but you can if you want to. You can also change the word wrapping. So another kind of a nice thing to have here is there's the options for changing these things. These will automatically populate. With a lot of ISO and AS9100 and other such formats out there, there's a lot of, there's control of the actual document itself and its editing. That's done from inside of report properties. So for example, inside of here, this would be inside of your quality manual, you would have a document name or number, and you can put it in there, and then the last person who authored it, you can put your name in there and stuff. You can add in some custom fields. So for example, I could do whatever I wanted to enter, and then I could enter those values in here. Okay. I can say, I'm going to hit apply. And right here under, let's see all of this. So we have prepared for, these are custom values that will appear on the inside of here once you fill those in. So for example, I can come in here and right click, and I can go to insert, and I can go to report properties, and I can put in like the ISO cert. And when I click outside of here, it's going to automatically put the value in that I typed in there for that. Okay. Some of these values, like part inspected, these values can also be automatically filled in. Rather than going through to the report properties page, it's better to go through here to the piece property page. And what I can do is, since this part number is not going to necessarily change for this workspace or for this IMinspect project, a better thing to do inside of here would be to put in the part number in the actual project properties. You can put in the part name. All kinds of information. I can put in here, for example, the rev level. Okay, so I'm going to put that as rev A. Put in for each piece, then I can put in all kinds of information here. So for example, if my part is serialized, I can put in a serial number for it. I can put in an order number for it. I can put in the name of the operator that ran the part, and I can put in the name of the device or a serial number of the device that was used. So then when I come in here, I'm going to get rid of this guy. When I go to part inspected, I can right click on this, and I go to insert, and I can go to project properties and just put in, for example, the part number. Okay, and then I can put in the rev, simply right click, insert, and I can go to project properties, the rev. That's a custom field. So you'll see it just adds in the custom and then the name, okay? Then I can do operator, insert, and now I go down to, instead of project properties, I go to piece properties, and I can add in the operator name. Again, this could be piece specific, so I can go down here and just add in device. Okay, and now it's automatically going to fill in all of those values for the particular part. Part inspected will not change within this IMinspect project. Rev level won't change. The operator name will change. Whenever you go to do a second piece, it'll prompt you for who is the operator, what equipment is he using, stuff like that. It'll automatically prompt you for that information, and it'll update for each piece. These values, as long as you have this template saved, are not going to change, and this is not going to change. So let's say that this is a, how I want all of my reports to look, something like this, where I have color maps, I have the report tables, I have feature tables, I have my cross-section view. If I like the way that this looks, I can come in here and I can go to Save as Layout. And I'm going to name this layout some name to remember it by. Save. And now when I go and I create a new report, it's going to automatically use whatever the default is. Okay. There isn't really a way to easily open up that layout that you created and create a report from there. The best way to do that is to go up to the IMinspect options page. Again, under objects and under reports, you can go here to the formatted report layout, and you can go to desktop and open default.ezl. Okay. Now, one thing to note is that if I wanted to save these to a different location, what I'd usually do is I'm going to go to that desktop or wherever I saved it, and I'm going to cut these, and I always go to the actual place where Polyworks stores the report layouts. That way I don't have to continue having it on my desktop. Go to the report folder, layout, and I'm just going to save it in there. That way it's with all of the default ones that Polyworks comes with. Okay, and then I just go to my computer, program files, layout, and I can select that default. Okay, now that I have that selected, if I go in and I create a new one, it'll automatically pop up with the report template that I had created, and I can give it, fill in all the values that I need, right like that. Okay. So, and again, it'll automatically fill all that in based on the input I put in. Now you'll notice on the second page, because when I saved it, it had snapshots here, it's automatically going to create this window where you need to drag a snapshot. Okay. So that'll allow me to put these in right like that. Okay. Now, that being said, when I go to create a second piece, if I had this snapshot in this window right here, it's automatically going to recalculate and refresh this image to what the current part is. So when I go to do my second piece, I don't have to continuously drag these in. Once it's created, it's automatically going to go. This would only apply, using these would only apply when you're completely reprogramming a different part. You can automatically have this as the layout. Okay. So one thing to show you as well, there are different features that you can measure with. So for example, we have planes, we have circles, lines, all kinds of stuff up here. If I select, let's say that I wanted to literally know where everything in my program is going to be, and I just select all of it, and I right click and I go to report, it's automatically going to create a whole bunch of different reports, or a whole bunch of different tables. You'll have your feature table. This is going to be all your geometric features of lines, circles, planes, points, anything like that. It'll create a report for the cross section to tell you what your line profile is, your deviations, and all of that. It'll create a table for your comparison points. There it goes. Show you where all of those are at. One other thing that it'll create is it'll create a table for calipers if you're using calipers. This will actually be separate from your geometric features tables. So if you create a table with everything and you're looking through your feature table trying to find your calipers, they're not going to be in there. They're in a completely separate table here. Okay. Now, as nice as this type of reporting is inside of Polyworks, it is fairly limited because once it's been exported as a PDF, it's just images that have been saved inside of a PDF, which doesn't allow you to select text or anything like that, which can be kind of cumbersome when it comes to transposing values onto another format. So what they also have for capability is you can right click on the table and you can go ahead and you can export this to Microsoft Office. So for example, if I export to Microsoft Office, I'm going to go to Excel, one page, it's automatically going to export these into columns and into rows so that I can transpose those into whatever other fields I want, or whatever other report fields I want. I don't know if it's sharing that, if you can see all of it. Okay, so it'll be in Excel there. If I right click on snapshots here, I can go ahead and I can export this to Microsoft Office as well. And what it'll do is it'll put in a second Microsoft Office window here. If I select a whole bunch of things at once, it'll put them all in, but it's going to create a separate sheet for each one of these items if I select one item per page. Now, if I go ahead and right click on these and I export them to one page, what it's going to do is just stack one on top of the other on the same page like that. So that's how the best way to go ahead and get that out of a PDF instead is to just export these features that way. The reports can be exported as HTML, images, or PDF. That's the best way to do it. If you have to be able to copy the actual values out, you're going to need to export to Microsoft through this way right here. Does anybody have any questions?
I think we're good.
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Let me know if you have any questions, if you need my contact information. Let's see if I can. This is my business card here, so you guys need to get a hold of me.
All right. Thank you very much for presenting today.
Not a problem. Thank you, guys.